Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Check Writers Room. 3 GPs, 3 angles, 1 hot take.
I'm Yasmin Cruz-Farine.
I'm Shalonda Armstrong.
My name is Sydney Thomas. Let's get into it.
So we have a couple spicy things we want to get into this week. 3 GPs, 3 hot takes. And so we're going to just immediately jump right into it. And we have a hot take that I'm excited to hear because it's coming from Sydney on what she's seeing in the market. And I always love your hot take. So take it away, Sydney. What are you thinking through?
Awesome. Okay, so my hot take this week is that women's health is cool again, but the reason why women's health is cool is actually more subtle than I think folks might originally or immediately assume. Millennials are running the show. We have Mamdani as mayor of New York City. We have us. And now that millennials are in charge, we have different expectations, especially millennial women. I think we've been trained for a very long time to expect the best in our healthcare and also push back when we don't have that experience reflected back to us. And so we're also been trained not to be shy about what's going on with our bodies. So I am really excited to be talking to my millennial friends about perimenopause, menopause. I feel like we're just open to talking about all of these really juicy, interesting topics, which then means that everyone else starts picking up on what we're putting down. Because we're talking about perimenopause, we get to hear ads about MIDI and what MIDI is doing at MIDI Health with perimenopausal women. And because we're talking about and hearing from folks like Halle Berry on menopause, we're able to have these open conversations with our auntie friends about what it looks like when we hit that stage. I think it's beautiful. And, I just want to say thanks to us. Thanks to the millennials.
I don't know, Sydney. I kind of have to... I have to push back. I don't know, Shalonda, about you. I'm really interested to hear what you have to say. But the last few deals that were focused on women's health, the minute this could be also an issue for men as well, I think the aperture for openness, if the beachhead market is women's health, I've seen like 5-time exited female founders in healthcare companies that there's no lead, they've been raising, and they can't get it done. And I've seen that multiple times. Where there's that kind of opening, then I see some traction. Because I think at the end of the day, there's still a ton of investor education where you have teens as the percentage of check writers that's female, and the rest of your tour is going to be shaking your tin can in front of men who are going to ask you over and over again, is the market big enough? I've seen it too many times to not kind of say, maybe on Instagram, we're all talking about frozen shoulder, or we're letting each other know that, you might want a divorce during menopause. But I don't know that your roadshow as a founder in women's health is going to change the reception of how many meetings you need to do and how much investor education you need to do.
I think you both have interesting points, and I think you're both right. Women's health is more than like fertility and perimenopause, and for us, the number one killer in women is still heart disease. And we still don't bring enough attention to that, right? And so I do think that there's absolutely this space of a conversation of what does women's health actually need, and then what is needed to scale those companies. But to Yasmin's point, I think for us to accelerate some of these women's health conversations in the venture market, we're going to have to do a little bit of a Trojan horse, right? And you're going to have to talk about how this is impacting men as well, because that's what's going to get the dollars. But absolutely, women are going to benefit from the solutions. I know it's not right. It's not the best, outcome that we all want, but we also have to play the game that's on the field right now.
The access to venture, like even the women within venture, are usually a bit of a certain um, demographic from a socioeconomic perspective. And so I think that influenced especially the first wave of women's health products that were funded in venture. I'm thinking about like Carrot Health, I'm thinking about Tia, I'm thinking about some of these companies that were funded specifically to solve a problem that pretty much like exclusively was for higher income women. And what excites me so much about this moment is that we're actually now talking about just like what happens to all women. And so I think that, what is really interesting now is we are seeing this like new wave of technologies and systems that are focused on this broader population of women. I mean, I was the first institutional investor in Teal Health, which is an at home pap smear company. All women should have a pap smear every year, and you start, having a period up until your early 20s. And then you can, if talk to your doctor, there's like really specific,
I was
amount
going to
of
say,
years.
we
I
are
don't want
not,
to,
we are not physicians, whatever, because I know there's also conflicting information around that. So whatever your physician or gynecologist directs is best.
yes, but all women should have a pap smear. And so that is something that is actually impacting all of us. And when I tell you how hard it was to get her first round of financing done, because these higher income women were like, why would I not want to go to my doctor? I love my doctor. I always have time off to go to
She's
my
my
doctor.
friend.
Right. And I was just like, but this isn't for you. This is for the woman who can't get an hour off to go see her doctor because the only doctor that she wants to see is the black or brown doctor who lives 2 towns away. And, it's just, there was this disconnect that was there. And so what I'm excited about is it seems like there's at least this interest and, um, real openness to problems that are affecting all women instead of just a really specific group of women.
I think also why I think to your point, Sydney, women's health is becoming cool again is because traditionally a lot of women, yes, they're the chief medical officers for the family, but they were also at the bottom of the list. And so a lot of women made sure that the kids were getting their checkups and they had everything that they need, or that their spouses were good to go. But they were putting themselves last. And now we're seeing women actively choosing themselves and making sure they're staying on top of their health care. So I do think that it's a moment. But then when we talk about can they get the right funding to not just start, but to actually get to the growth stage to continue to accelerate, that's where it's still a wild card to see like can we get the exits that we need to keep funding this space. So that transitions us to the story we're watching, and this one may get a little spicy. So Yasmin, I'm gonna ask you to take us through what you're watching right now and kind of give us your thoughts on it.
Yeah, so I think we have heard a few different angles of what's happening with Phia Health, Phia Health. uh, I mean, we
We could
transitioned
start
to
a women's health company.
yes, we should. Actually, no, we transitioned to shopping. Phia, which is the name actually comes from merging Phoebe Gates and Sophia Kiani, and their names. And what's been in the news is there was an investigative reporting done, code review by Bloomberg, that brought to light that there was cookie stuffing happening. And ultimately, I'll give kind of an overview, but I'd love, Shalonda, if you could maybe talk more about how this might show up in code. But essentially, there's in a marketplace, which is what this is essentially, is you need to get credit for creating revenue. And what they were doing was on their iOS only mobile, not on the desktop, kind of overriding and putting their attribution link ahead of creators and other folks who would or could get revenue for their take for directing a consumer to buy a dress from J. Crew. And so there's so much to maybe unpack here.
So I want to start by saying this. They're not the first to do it. They're the ones that got caught. So it is essentially you just have your code base and you have it in there and you can say it's an error or, and it could be, you just didn't catch it. But it's essentially, to your point, Yasmin, you just have it where once it goes through the whole process and then at the end it flips it to you actually get credit for the sale. So it is I'm not going to say a standard practice, but it is a practice that a lot of other startups have done as well. Some that have been on stages and have openly admitted that they have done similar things to get some early sales in. So when I hear about this story, yes, was it wrong? Absolutely. But they're not the only ones that have done it. And I mean, we've heard Alexis on stage all the time talking about the early Reddit days and how all of those responses was him and his co-founder, as false.
Really? He was
Yes.
just talking to
Oh, he
himself.
openly says that. Yeah.
Yes. So I mean, we know that some of this happens in the early days. I'm not defending what they did. I guess I just want to make sure that I know that there's a lot of outrage, but the outrage is because one of the co-founders' last names is Gates, and that's really what the outrage is about. And so I just want to make sure that we're clear where we're placing our anger at.
Okay, I have a few clarifying questions. One, how much more money were they able to take home by doing this cookie stuffing? Like what is I guess I'm curious about like what is the magnitude of this on their business, this error on their business? And then two, are they then taking money away from the same influencers who they were asking to help publicize their business? Is that who's losing out here? Like who are they taking the cookies from? Who's getting their cookies stolen?
Well, we only have self-reported information in what they put in press releases. They noted 1 million plus users to get the essentially $185 million valuation. There are some Substacks that try to break down where they are from a GMV perspective. So breaking that down for the audience, and this kind of plays into, I'll answer your question directly. What's reported is that they were likely diverting revenue from creators and now, mind you, one of the ways in which they've had a very high profile company. I think that also is why, Shalonda, they've been building in public. They also have a podcast. They actually have a lot of episodes with a lot of founders. So they were working on their visibility. So I think that's playing into it. But I also saw they invited like 200 creators or lots of creators, enough to fill like a floor in a New York office space to help promote their business, which Sydney is pointing to. So if these are this is your distro, but you're also diverting revenue from them, is kind of not the greatest. But this is what I think happened. So if one of them graduated 2025, May 2025, they received a $250K grant from Stanford. They raised their pre-seed immediately from Soma Capital. But their seed happened, so they raised pre-seed May 2025. Their seed happened September 2025. They raised $8 million from KP, right? From Annie Casey was the lead. So maybe there was some like, oh, your dad's famous. Mine invented AOL. Oh my gosh, your dad invented Microsoft? Girl, I got you.
Let's
like,
be friends.
Is essentially if like, I don't know, Blue Ivy and Rashida Jones were like, I see you, like, let's start a brand, right? Like that's what happened. And so stay on track with the timing. So raise the seed September 2025. A quarter later, December 2025, Notable Capital rolled in another 35.5 million. So they essentially raised pre-seed, seed, and Series A in a couple of quarters, less than a year. So they had to grow into a $185 million valuation really quickly. And you and I know, we were diligencing a marketplace, and one of the things that we were backing into is like, what would be the gross merchandise value is what GMV is. Like, what's the universe of volume that you would need to justify the valuation? And then obviously you have to take into account their take rate. In consumer, the numbers are huge, right? And I don't think that they were going to get to maybe like where they were going to be for the Series B if they planned on raising it next quarter or whatever they were thinking about for the speed. And I think they were maybe taking some shortcuts. I don't know if one could have a code review and work with engineers and like miss this per se. Like, that will be the truth, that's on them. But what I do know is they probably needed to, like, I looked up, for example, StockX to raise their Series B needed to push 3 billion through their marketplace.
Wow.
So I don't know that they were backing into, let's say, a billion to get to their revenue numbers.
Thank you so much for walking us through that timeline. That was so fascinating. I learned so much. I also want to point out something that we found when looking at this company is that, unlike her dad, she's not an engineer, which makes me think that while this was an oversight, it was probably not something that she owned directly. I'm not trying to save her, here. I'm just saying like what I think might be true. The other thing I want to note is that shopping apps, graveyard of companies. Graveyard. Like, so many people have tried to launch and failed at launching a shopping app. I'm thinking about the company, there was one just a few years ago that I thought was the coolest, launched by, I think she was one of the co-founders of Stitch Fix. And it's an incredibly difficult category. And so I assume that part of the reason why she was able to raise so much capital so quickly is because just by virtue of it having her name on it, more people are going to look up and try this shopping app, I'm assuming. It's almost like baked in Nepo baby marketing compared to a company or a founder who's starting from zero to try and launch something to get to this scale this quickly would have been unheard of. So, I don't know where the there is here for me, but I do think that like my assumption is um, she didn't really know what was going on, and she's gotten this far because she's been able to ride the wave of her family's name for better or for worse, and now she has to decide like where she wants, how they want to rectify this. I think it's actually a really great opportunity for her to take a stand and decide what does she want to do. I think right now I have not seen her respond to any comments, and so I don't know, maybe she's thinking about it, maybe she's like pulling together an advisory council and really thinking through how she wants to take next steps. But I think that like this is an opportunity for her to stand on what she believes in. Now that she knows the impact of what she did, what is she going to do?
So I think this is a couple things you could take away from this. One, I think that there's a lot of fraudulent activity that happens in the early days so that founders can capture the market share, right, to prove these metrics that they're growing into these valuations. Right or wrong, it's happening. I think the other part is founders always want to know why you need a technical co-founder. This is one of the reasons it comes up, right? Because you can't just claim, I have no idea. I had no idea that that got in the code. And so if you don't
Yeah.
have someone reviewing that code and knows that code in and out, and I understand that we are in a very different coding era of how applications are being built, you are still responsible for knowing what is in your code, though. And this is going to be a lesson learned for a lot of founders who are not quote unquote technical. You have to have someone there on your team that can vouch for that code before it hits consumers' hands. I think the other part is building out front when you have a famous parent may not always be the best idea, right? I think sometimes if you know that your name carries a lot of weight, you may want to just get some solid footing first and show a real model before you want to just pop out with your company. To Yasmin's point, you went from graduation to a 250K grant to a pre-seed, a seed, and a Series A. And I think that timeline, Yasmin, keep me honest here, was like a year and a half?
Under a year.
Under a year. So like
Yeah.
that is crazy. And I get that's the speed that some things are moving at, but you also have to understand the risk that comes with that. Now, the other part, again, I'm to this, would this be a story if her last name was not Gates? No. And you also need to know that your last name is Gates and what comes with that.
Well, I think this cap table probably would have brought this to light too. But I think I think there's some great points here for founders too, which is one, you are responsible. In this case, I'm not trying to throw shade because I didn't have an internship at British Vogue, but maybe like you also should have interned at Microsoft. Probably could have made that one happen. And then second, but then once that happens, like don't let a good crisis go to waste. And right now, if you look on Phia, you would never know that there's this big trust moment happening between them, their customers, the public, and their investors. And no news or no acknowledgement that this is an issue isn't necessarily the right way to play this. I don't think. So don't let a good crisis go to waste. One of the things that Sydney, that I had an idea about, maybe they don't want my advice either. I'm not on their cap table. I'm not Kris Jenner. But would be like maybe do something with the creator economy, right? Like they're the ones that you interrupted. So how do you platform more of them?
I love that. I love that. I think we'd be remiss without calling back, her parents' history. And the sins of her father are not her own sins, but Bill Gates did have that huge antitrust moment with regards to Microsoft Internet Explorer being automatically downloaded on everybody's computer, and how that was, intentionally or unintentionally threatening to the competition. And so I also think like she's also learned from folks who have played hardball. And so I also want to be, kind of playing the other side of the devil's advocate that I was before. Maybe she didn't know. Maybe she knew full well what she was doing and actually just wanted to run with it until she got to the other side of this. And so I think we won't know until we get the full court press. And even then, maybe we won't. But I do think it's an interesting case study around just like the trade-offs that one decides to take when they decide to be a founder.
I had another idea. I didn't think about this. I don't know legally fraud if there will be litigation against her. So maybe some of the silence is from lawyers who say, like, you have to have make sure you're preserving all records, make no public statement. So that could also be a reason why you're not hearing from her. And, in some cases, maybe her lawyers are telling her there could be really severe and life-altering consequences for this type of behavior. I mean, certainly we know of a founder who is currently incarcerated for the ways that she misled her investors. So.
I agree. I'm sure she has the best legal team possible guiding her through this. I will also say to Sydney's point, her father and his height of his career and when he was building out Microsoft against his other competitors, it's known that they constantly have said, and this is a Picasso quote, I believe, and it's that, good artists copy, great artists steal. So unfortunately, here we are. And so we are not trying to condone any of this activity, but you have to understand you are going to get caught at some point. Either your consumer is going to figure it out, or, for some other companies, I know Uber had their blip years ago, an update where they rolled out an update that was tracking their users illegally, and their VCs caught it. So, like, you have to know that you cannot do these type of fraudulent things and think somehow it's not going to be picked up by anyone. All right, transitioning to, I'm excited about the check that Sydney just recently wrote. So, and would you write the check? Sydney, talk us through your latest deal, and would love to understand like the details and what really made you write the check.
Yeah, this is a fun one because it's actually a co-investment of ours. And so excited to talk about a company that we're in together, Shalonda and Yaz. We missed you on this one. We'll get you in the next one. It's a company called Scout. What they're building is for college athletes who are actually in this NIL era. For folks who don't know what that means, recently legislation has mandated that schools pay their college athletes. I went to Duke. I saw firsthand how incredibly hard these kids worked on the basketball court and then were expected to get an actual degree and profited. Oftentimes, especially at Duke, most of those guys did not go pro. And so this was their shot. College was it. And they made zero money from that experience. But Duke pocketed millions from that experience. Coach K pocketed millions from that experience. And so I saw just like this discrepancy that was happening between the folks who were producing the labor and the folks who were actually getting access to the capital that that labor created. And I always thought it was wrong, but didn't know what to do about it until this legislation became more prominent. And I'm just so excited about Scout because it's led by a founder who is also a former college athlete and the son of a athlete who played in professional football. And so he's seen what the life is like for these folks and knows what it looks like to make a ton of money in professional football and then lose it all. He knows what it looks like to make a ton of money in these professional sports and actually, maintain it and grow it and provide this legacy to your family. And so he's focused on how do I help these kids? Because in college, they're kids. Like we get to college at 17, you are a child. How am I helping them actually manage and maintain and grow the wealth that they're now able to come into because of these NIL regulations? So we invested actually, I want to say like 2 years ago, and then doubled down on their Series A, which they just completed earlier this year because of the growth that they're seeing. They're in mostly schools across the South, which I think makes sense, given like the prevalence of sports and the excitement around sports in the South. And they're actually starting to grow in California as well. They're coming to SDSU, which I'm very proud about. So just really excited to see the impact that he's making on these students while also building, I think, a really interesting, financial infrastructure for these schools to actually pay these student athletes.
And so with NIL, of course, July 2020 came and legislation came down that you can now pay college athletes. With that, universities had to scramble. They came up with collectives, which were a fancy way of just saying your most wealthy alumni come together. They put together a pool of money, and they were going to allocate dollars to the athletes in the programs for what we would call quote unquote revenue sports. And so revenue sports is usually basketball and football. Everything else is considered a non-revenue sports. NIL kind of flipped that. And so with social media and influencers, now you're seeing athletes who are in non-revenue sports actually gain a large footing. What Scout has been able to do is actually put infrastructure around that. So helping the universities actually manage all of the activities and deals that come through because they still have to remain compliant. And then also on the athlete side, you actually have to know what to do with the money afterwards. You are usually a 1099 and no one understands that at 18, right? And so you're just getting a check and you're spending it, not realizing
Taxes.
that, yeah, you're going to get hit with taxes. And if you're selling your parents' taxes, that could be also another issue if you're still being claimed as a dependent. And so what Scout has been able to do is put infrastructure not just around the universities to keep them compliant, but also the student athletes, helping them set up the LLCs, helping them set up all of the infrastructure and operationalize their own brand, so to speak, and making sure that they capitalize on their name, image, and likeness. This is one of the reasons why there's been a lot of talk around the NBA draft and why it's taking so long for certain players to leave college. They're getting paid millions of dollars to stay in college now. And
Right.
so,
Actually finish college.
yeah, so it actually could be a benefit to stay as long as you, if you're not a lottery pick, why are you gambling on going to the NBA right now to just be a journeyman? You may get called up, you may get downgraded to the G League, and now you're only making, 30 to 40 grand a year. So there's actually incentives with NIL that I think are really positive, and I love that Scout's able to help universities capitalize on that. Also, Scout is flexible enough to help universities understand what they need to do to constantly respond to the market. So we have gone from not having dollars attached to scholarships, because scholarships used to be that you couldn't actually tie the dollars to the scholarship. Now we're quasi doing it. But now there's a lot of other levers that you can pull for these college athletes. So I really love the space that they're in. NIL is still very much the wild, wild west, but the way that they're addressing this from the college standpoint, not just the student athlete, I think is the real winner here.
One of the things I am trying to figure out is it says that he works with the players, right, who are from like almost like a family office, or if you were working with a sports agency that was kind of like your quarterback. But then he also, you mentioned, is working on the institutional side. So how is he B2B with an institution, and the UX UI is great for them, and also B2C with stakeholders, with players? Like, how is that working?
So I think the cool thing that he's doing on the B2C side to start is he's selling to the players through the athletic directors and coaches. What he's found is that the folks who have the most trust with the players is not the head of payroll in the administration of UNC Chapel Hill. It is actually the coaches who see these kids every day and who the coaches have, who the players have grown to trust with, some incredibly important decisions. And on the B2B side, he's selling to those administrators. And so helping those administrators in, HR, in payroll, actually pay, like literally, like when Shalonda says like these schools did not have the infrastructure to pay these children, they literally didn't, they didn't know how to pay them. Like they couldn't wire the money. They
Right.
did not have the
They don't have
infrastructure.
business bank accounts, right? Like you need that to not commingle funds, things like that. Got
Exactly.
it. Yeah. No, it kind of reminds me similar but different with like creators, right? Like everyone's like, oh,
Yes.
okay, the agency's gone, but you need kind of that project manager, the quarterback, like engaging with institutions as an 18-year-old is probably not that simple. whether you're a creator or an athlete. Yeah, I mean, I really like this a lot. I love clearly the founder market fit, problem fit, the B2B aspects. It's also a trend, right? Like the market size is shifting because it's growing and expanding. And yeah, I wish I met Michael earlier on because I definitely, there's so many aspects of this that, you know, there are new positions that are being made within institutions that need this support that never even existed. So like the perception of like what even is the status quo, like it's being built as we go along. So kudos to the both of you. I really wish I got a piece of this action. I really love it. So what do you think needs to be true to raise a Series B? Like what does next look like for Michael?
I think the cool thing that he's starting to do now and needs to continue to do is to build not just out the infrastructure for the football teams and the basketball teams, but also the hockey teams, the volleyball teams. Like there's actually all of these other teams at these schools that are also getting paid, like actually now because of the new regulation that weren't before, but they're not the hot, cool teams. And I think as he continues to grow the number of sports on each at each campus that he's working with, I think it will unlock more and more revenue and then more and more capital will come.
I think this is also a huge opportunity for a lot of what we would call the mid majors. So of course you have your Power Five schools, or I'm sorry, your Power Five uh, conferences, and then you have kind of the mid majors, right? And a lot of the mid majors, they are attracting the talent, but they do need the infrastructure. So I think this is a huge opportunity for Scout to dominate in that marketplace. I also think that finally, like we're putting some real guardrails around what NIL looks like from both the school standpoint and the student athletes. Because I say this all the time. The NCAA made a whole new workforce overnight with no criteria. Of course, you're going to have your stars and they're going to go get their agents early on and they're going to take their 20% cut, and that's great. But then what about the rest of those athletes? And a lot of those athletes, they are expecting anywhere from 500 to $1 million coming back to them because they decide to sign with the schools. And I think up until recently, we were having, I'll call them student athletes, I'm not going to call them children. They were switching schools every semester, right? If
The
you
transfer portal's hot.
The
Hot, hot, hot.
transfer portal was like hotter than if you could quit your job. Like the way these kids were quitting their job and going to get another one was quicker than any other adult in America.
Yeah.
So, and now I know we're putting some guardrails around that, but I also think that Scout is also helping like schools understand what needs to be in place to continue to scale this NIL. All right, ladies. So we're going to wrap it up. What's our moment of joy? So, everyone, if you've heard this episode, you've heard my voice. It's been a little raspy. And ladies and gentlemen, it is because I was irresponsible this past weekend. I was in New York. I went to the Jay-Z concert both Friday and Saturday night to see The Reasonable Doubt and
I
Blueprint
didn't know
Show.
you went twice.
Oh, I
Oh,
went
I thought
twice. Shout out to everyone who was in the building. It was a moment. It was epic. It was everything we could have ever anticipated. But that's my moment of joy. What about you, Yasmin?
so. What's bringing me joy? I actually just went to a really small town that on my father's side of the family is from in Georgia, and I learned so much about my family history, and it was just beautiful. And when you know kind of where you come from, it's really, really empowering. And I mean, I know there are families that have archivists and they dig into that, but I just learned like some of the women in my family were inheriting land in the 1930s, which is just incredible. And they bought the land there in that town, and it was just beautiful to just see some of the ways in which actually my great grandfather was very enterprising as well. So now I kind of understand some of my fixation and fascination on entrepreneurship. So just encourage people to go and dig into kind of where you come from, and it'll make you, sit up taller and puff your chest out for sure.
That's beautiful. Okay. So my grandpa was one of those archivists. And so when I was growing up, he would go to different libraries and try and find the every single person who was a descendant of, like, who he had descended from, therefore who we had descended from. And so I actually have like this huge book underneath my desk that I keep with me that is like a chronicle of our family legacy. And I completely agree. It's something like so grounding. Like I'm getting teary eyed even thinking about it. And just like such a beautiful gift that they give to you, because I think what a lot of folks don't realize too is like our stories are not actually oftentimes in these libraries. Like this came from so many conversations that he had to have with different relatives and extended family, because like when you go back to slavery times, like I have so many actually of those records in this book, and it's like UNK, meaning like unknown Black person, is written down as your great 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 grandma. You don't have a name, you don't have an age, you don't have a location. And so it is such a labor of love that our ancestors do for us to make sure that we have this information.
Love it. I love it. And then Sydney, what's bringing you joy right now?
Yes. So I gave you guys the heads up of what I'm, you know, digging right now, but I am just so obsessed with Kiki. It feels like she's one of these people who has just been putting in the work consistently for years. Like I'm thinking about her Baby This Is Kiki like podcast slash, honestly at this point it's basically a TV show. And she's been doing this for years, and only this year does she get access to, like, she was interviewing Michelle Obama at Ebony or Essence Fest. She was interviewing Tracy Ellis Ross, and she just like she now is able to come to each one of these conversations with like such a depth of repertoire that she brings to them that enables her guests to actually say just just such amazing things. I'm also obsessed with Tracy Ellis Ross. And so there's something specific about this episode that she had with Tracy Ellis Ross where like I've seen so many things that Tracy Ellis Ross has done. Like I've seen so many of her interviews, maybe all of them. And I had never seen her so fully in her element than in this conversation with Kiki. And I think it is tied to just how skilled Kiki is at being able to bring out the truth of the person who she's talking to. And they were just giddy Black ladies having a great time, talking in different voices, having different, like, just a breath of conversation that was just like silly and goofy and lovely. And I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you, Kiki Palmer, for being the weird Black girl for so long until it became cool. I am just like so in awe of you and all of the things that you do, and just a hustler. Like, so just impressed, proud, grateful
Yeah,
to be on the
multi
same show.
hyphenate.
One of the things I love about Kiki and also with Tracy Ellis Ross, they've never been afraid of the pivot. And for founders, I think that is really critical. It's they embraced when a moment was over and they were ready to pivot, and they did it scared, but they did it anyway. And I think that's really important because that's how you get longevity in any industry, is you can't be afraid of the pivot. So I love that. All right, ladies, another episode down. Next week, my voice will be back. I promise, no more screaming.
And that's the Check Writers Room. Special thanks to Natalia Skoko for editing. Subscribe to our newsletter and view show notes at checkwritersroom.com. Leave us a review wherever you are listening.